Kim You-jeong's 1936 short story Night Cherry Blossoms, Yang, starkly contrasts the splendid scenery of a spring night with the hidden sorrow beneath it. Following the footsteps of three women, Gyeongja, Yong-ae, and Jung-suk, chatting under the full cherry blossoms at Changgyeongwon, we slowly uncover Jung-suk's deep-seated heartbreak. Through her eyes, the story reveals the struggles of poverty, a painful divorce, and the desperate longing for her lost daughter. This narrative masterfully blends the ordinary festivity of viewing cherry blossoms with the poignant joys and sorrows of commoners during the 1930s. Night Cherry Blossoms author Kim You-jeong. Source Jogwang July issue 1936. A soft breeze carrying fragrance occasionally brushed against the cheeks. With every breeze, petals flew in the air one by one, fluttering as they gently landed on someone's head or coat strings. The electric lights nestled between the branches of the trees were bright and bathed faintly in their rays. The fully bloomed cherry blossoms looked as beautiful as if a light pink curtain had been drawn open. Oh my, with so many flowers blooming, it makes me dizzy. Gyeongja, walking under the cherry trees among the crowd, accidentally plucked a flower that happened to brush against the bridge of her nose and took a deep, lingering sniff. The more she smelled it, the more her chest felt refreshed, yet she felt herself getting unconsciously intoxicated. After bringing it to her nose a few more times, she then thrust it under the nose of Yong-ae, who was following beside her, and said, "Hey, smell this flower." Dizzy, right? What's there to be dizzy about, just smelling a little flower scent like this? I suppose so. Gyeongja stole a glance at Yong-ae's pumpkin-like chubby figure and thought to herself that because she was so plump, her breathing must be heavy too. You really don't know how to appreciate flowers. She couldn't help but sigh to herself. Fine, I don't know how to appreciate flowers, but then why did you come all the way to Changgyeongwon? Yong-ae asked, opening her eyes wide. Hey, your eyes are scary. Put them away, Gyeongja said, turning her head away and letting out a laugh. Does having eyes mean you can appreciate flowers? You have to know how to smell them with your nose. They're meant to be looked at. Who breaks them off like a child? You really have no idea. It's probably because you lack refinement. You only truly know how good a flower is when you smell it like this. Saying this, Gyeongja crushed the flower from earlier between her palms, smelled it again, and said, "Ah! It's intoxicating. It's making me quite dizzy." But Yong-ae didn't reply to that, and instead said, "Hey, what if the owner throws another fit?" She rubbed her nose discreetly, thinking of that harsh bald man. "Hey, I don't want to hear it. You're talking nonsense. Let him brag about his kid or whatever." "Still, we said we'd be back by 9, so we should keep our promise," she said, lifting her arm, and then startled. "It's already 9:07. So what if it's 10? Just because we're cafe waitresses, does he think we're dogs or pigs raised in his house? We can just leave after we see what we want to see." After Gyeongja snapped at the innocent Yong-ae like this, she looked around for Jung-suk, who had come with them, as if suddenly remembering. At some point, Jung-suk had fallen behind and was walking alone at a distance. She was examining every child holding on to an adult's hand as they passed by, even petting the head of one child as if finding them adorable. But the way she occasionally brought the crumpled handkerchief in her right hand to her face, walking absent-mindedly, seemed unusual. Is she shedding tears? Why is Jung-suk so down again? Perhaps she's upset because the owner called her a brazen woman while she was talking back to him earlier. But Jung-suk isn't that narrow-minded. With these puzzling thoughts, Gyeongja quietly watched the colorful children nestling and smiling among the crowds of adults. And then, aha, she seemed to finally realize. The baby carried on a girl's back, giggling and waving its chestnut-sized fists, was cute, and the child shaking a toy in its mother's arms was also cute. The child in a suit, diligently following along while stuffing bread into their mouth with one hand. The child with a bowl cut, sitting with their legs draped over their father's shoulders, shouting, "Giddy up, horsey!" The little one in a yellow jacket and a tiny pink short skirt trying to cree, all under their mother's skirt as if this busy sightseeing was their first time. "Hey, Yong-ae, Jung-suk must be thinking about her lost daughter again. Look at her, isn't she constantly wiping her tears?" Well, Young-ae replied ambiguously, looking at Jung-suk's back with a displeased expression for a moment before saying, "She seems to be thinking about it a lot more these days. She's often like that at home, too. Why act like that just over losing a child? If it were me, I'd actually be glad to feel so unburdened. How could someone not miss the child they gave birth to? It's because you haven't had a child yet." Young-ae jumped in as if it were her own business, but feeling a bit embarrassed, wondering if anyone had heard her, as people were packed tightly all around. She glanced around nervously and stepped right up next to Gyeongja, whispering, "She raised her to the age of 4 before losing her, so why wouldn't she miss her? If she had died, it'd be one thing, but she ran out while they were busily handing out theater flyers, and someone took her. How could she not be heartbroken? Oh, really? I thought lost meant she was dead. Then why doesn't she file a missing person report? She said it's been 2 years since she filed the report. And she still hasn't found her?" "Wait a minute." Gyeongja blinked and pondered for a moment before asking, "Then I suppose Jung-suk doesn't even know who the child's father is?" "Why wouldn't she know?" Because Young-ae snapped back so sharply with a single phrase, Gyeongja couldn't say a word and her face turned red. "Geez, who does she think she is? Damn wench. Maybe I should just ditch her and walk alone." Gyeongja glared out of spite, but getting angry back felt a bit awkward, so in a soothing tone she said, "You're something else. Answering is enough. Why do you have to snap like that?" Then she lowered her head, took 5 or 6 steps, and looked back at Young-ae. "Jung-suk lives alone now, right? Then does she ever meet the child's father?" "I don't know." "Would it kill you to know? You live in the same house, and you're sworn sisters with Jung-suk. How could you not know?" Gyeongja stopped in her tracks and glared at Young-ae with disdain. It was because she felt she'd be perfectly fine not hanging around this idiotic girl. However, Young-ae, though initially playing hard to get, realized her disadvantageous position and docilely backed down. Why would they meet when they broke up? Truth be told, she divorced him and dumped him. Well then, wait a minute. Gyeongja closed her eyes tightly, getting lost again in the thought she had been pondering earlier. Well then, couldn't the child's father have taken her? You don't know what you're talking about. The guy who's her father is someone who doesn't even know if his own child is precious or not. A man has to know how to love his wife to know how to cherish his child. So she ended up with a really bad guy? He was terrible, no doubt about it. I didn't see it myself, so I don't know for sure, but from what Jung-suk says, it seems she suffered immensely. Her wife at home was starving with nothing to eat. But this young guy was drinking day and night. He was poor too, so where would he even get the money for booze? It seems he would go to his friends' houses, sponge off them here and there, and stumble back home only in the middle of the night. But when he came home, whatever his wife said, he wouldn't answer a word and just collapsed and slept like a mute. Not only that, he hated being at home so much that he'd leave at the crack of dawn and come back in the middle of the night, and leave at dawn again the next day. So the wife never had a chance to sit him down and quietly have a word with him. The household was the same. A couple has to work together. What good is it if only one person tries? So, driven to her wits' end, Jung-suk. Young-ae paused, realizing she might have blabbered too much about someone else's personal affairs. She felt a bit uneasy, wondering what if these words mistakenly reached Jung-suk's ears. But having already brought it up, she was itching to finish the story. "Don't you go repeating this anywhere." "Am I crazy? Why would I say such things?" Gyeongja swore firmly. So, driven to her wits' end, Jung-suk was so sick of him that she practically dumped him. The landlord was pressing for rent, the baby was whining. How could she live? If it were me, I would have died of sheer rage. So one day, she sat down the heavily intoxicated man and said, "I can't live with you like this. I'll go beg for my own living, so you figure out what to do, and tomorrow let's separate our registers." She said it nicely, without getting angry at all. Well, there's a time and place for anger, and getting mad at that point wouldn't have done any good anyway. And since the child was still nursing, she said, "The baby can't survive away from its mother's embrace, so I'll keep her." That night he slept without a word, and from the next day he never came back. There's all sorts of people, right? Then, a few months later, a postcard arrived. When she read it, it said, "The divorce proceedings are complete as you wished, so go your own way." Such a bold letter. So would a guy like this care about his own child? He was so glad to get rid of his wife that he quickly divorced her and even sent a letter like that. That's true, but men usually go crazy over their own flesh and blood. So this guy must be insane? Absolutely insane. So Jong-suk nagged him every day, but he just ignored it, and eventually she was so dumbfounded she couldn't even speak. But apparently it wasn't like that at first. When he was a policeman, he was very sharp and respectable. But after getting fired from that, he started drinking and became an idiot like that. Why? Their relationship was good at first. If his wife got sick, he would brew medicine with his own hands and hold the iron for her, but then he just became a fool. It's been 3 years since then, but she hasn't heard a single word whether he's dead or alive. He must be a total idiot. Then again, it seems the more of an idiot they are, the more they obsess over women. Why? Just look at our owner. The guy acts like a dimwit, yet he's always chasing after girls' skirts, isn't he? Well, I guess so. If you get caught by someone like that, your life is ruined. Just look at Jong-suk. Isn't it pitiful? On top of that, not even a year later, she lost her daughter. You don't know, but she suffered immensely wandering around working at cafes to make a living for the two of them. Every time she went out, she'd beg the owner's wife to keep an eye on the child. But how can you watch kids playing by following them around everywhere? What's the point of having it around anyway? It actually turned out well. But how could a mother feel that way? Young-ae retorted. But since it was someone else's business and didn't cost her anything, she didn't feel satisfied without blabbering a bit more. She leaned in close to Gyeongja's ear and whispered secretly, as if sharing a story worth tens of thousands of yang. So our landlady keeps pestering her every day, saying she'll arrange a match somewhere else so she should get married again, but she won't listen. She says she's had such a hard time once that she's utterly sick of husbands. Young-ae poured out the rest of the story, even the parts better left unsaid. Why should she feel that way? She can get one, and if she doesn't like him, she can just kick him out again. That's easy to say, but is it really like that? Once a man clings to you, does he drop off easily, like a tick? Now, if it were you, maybe. Young-ae subtly pouted her lips as if implying that Gyeongja and Jong-suk were completely different kinds of people, but Gyeongja quickly caught on and retorted defensively. Of course it will. Be like that for you. Aren't you the idiot who gets teary-eyed when a drunk customer just yells at you? So naturally, you'd be scared of a husband. But that's all because you have no refinement. Being provoked like this, Young-ae felt deeply embarrassed. Her face turned red, and tears inevitably welled up in her eyes for real. Damn wench, so I'm an idiot? Listening to all my gossip without a single word of thanks, damn wench. How much schooling did she even get that she thinks she knows everything day and night? And where did she even pick up that damn word refinement that she uses it every chance she gets? So it's because I lack refinement, looking like a horse's head, thinking she's so great. Young-ae was fuming inside, but she fell short of Gyeongja in every way, whether in eloquence or presence, to confront her openly. She opened her mouth to speak, but hesitated. Is it because she's scared of her husband? Geez, why are you so narrow-minded? No matter how much she disliked the husband she lived with, even for a day, how could she tell him to get out and save face? Save face? Humph. Does saving face mean starving to death? Gyeongja snorted contemptuously. You don't even know what saving face is. Wow, you're something else. It's because you lack refinement. Seeing her chance, Young-ae quickly turned the word refinement back on her and used it. Gyeongja felt her pride slightly dented as her refinement was used so casually against her. Look at this wench. She learns what I use and throws it right back at me? Arrogant bitch. Does she even know what refinement is? Gyeongja glared sideways at her, but arguing over it seemed childish. What's saving face? Would you starve just to save face? Geez, you really can't help the uneducated. Are you so well educated then? Is that why you got baptized with beer by that drunkard the other day? What? What do you care if I got baptized with beer or not? You arrogant wench, who do you think? Gyeongja violently yanked Yonghae's arm back and was panting, fully enraged, when unexpectedly, in their startled state, they ended up tightly hugging each other. In this secluded corner with few people around, the bizarre cry of some unknown beast, echoing from just above the hill, gave them goosebumps all over their bodies. They hurried away to catch up with Jong-suk. "Ah, scary. Hey, what was that?" "I don't know what it is. Very creepy, right?" Exchanging these words, they looked at each other and smiled like children. Gyeongja stuck close to Jong-suk and said, "Jong-suk, aren't your legs tired? Shall we go sit in that restaurant for a bit and then head back out?" "Shall we?" Jong-suk had wanted to leave for a while, but because Gyeongja stubbornly held on to her to go together, she had just been following along half-heartedly. This time, as they entered the crowded restaurant and took a seat following Gyeongja's suggestion, she felt dizzy and her mind was blank, but when asked, "Shall we try some cider?" she replied agreeably, "I'll have whatever." They ordered 3 bottles of cider and 3 snacks. After downing a cup of cider, Gyeongja brought up the unresolved issue from earlier. "Young-ae, you said earlier that flowers are meant to be looked at, right? Then you should just buy a picture and hang it to look at. Why go through the trouble of coming all the way here?" Young-ae just slowly ate her food and flatly ignored her. She had experienced many times that arguing with the stubborn Gyeongja only ended up causing her grief. Eventually, since Gyeongja was provoking her so much, she had no choice but to turn her head toward Jong-suk. "What do you think, Uni? Are flowers meant to be looked at or plucked to smell? If that's the case, why not just buy perfume, spray it, and lie down at home? Why come all the way here?" She had no choice but to ask for support. However, Jong-suk was confused at first, not knowing what she was talking about, and then just replied gloomily and bitterly, "I don't know about things like that." Thinking about how she was often pointlessly pecked at by Gyeongja, Young-ae felt quite bitter. As they walked out around the pond, Gyeongja insisted on going into the amusement park to try riding the slide, so she followed her in but hadn't spoken a single word to her until then. Not only that, quietly watching Gyeongja frolicking around like a foal, she couldn't help but point fingers inwardly. Ugh, damn girl. Is she even a girl? Inside the amusement park, various children were flocking here and there. They hung from the swings, then moved to other swings, and when they got tired of the swings, they climbed up to the slide. Slipping among them, Gyeongja boldly rode the slide down once and laughed heartily. And as she crawled back up and slid down again, from a corner over there, "That butt is gonna wear out," someone said, clapping and laughing out loud. Gyeongja brushed her skirt, stood up, and looked over to see 3 middle schoolers, looking no older than 17 or 18, standing and laughing in her direction. In a sharp voice, Gyeongja immediately yelled, "Which one of you was it? The one who said my butt is gonna wear out," and charged at them, ignoring Young-ae's attempts to stop her. The immature students thought she would run away if teased. They never dreamed she would attack them like an eagle. All flustered, they couldn't say a word and turned pale, then stammered, "What did we even say to you?" Or, "We were just talking and laughing amongst ourselves." They sweat profusely trying to talk their way out of it, but Gyeongja showed no signs of stopping. "Is it a student's job not to study, but to go around catcalling women?" she said, making the face of the oldest student turn bright red. In this fierce atmosphere, onlookers gathered 1 or 2 at a time, eventually forming a thick wall of people all around. Some were so excited they shouted, "Yeah, that's right, well done," or others tried to break it up, saying, "They're just young, please let it go now." However, Jong-suk stood blankly apart on this side, just watching her own affairs. There, 2 young children, perhaps 5 or 6 years old, were sitting facing each other on a bench swing, playing. The little boy, glaring with wide eyes and acting stubbornly mean, was cute, and the little girl in traditional Korean clothes with bobbed hair, who came over on her own and kept glancing around timidly, was also cute. Every time the wind blew, her bobbed hair would flutter and then settle gently. The more Jong-suk watched her, the more desperately she wanted to scoop her up in a tight hug. If my Mojong had grown up like that, she'd be just about that size. And Jong-suk remembered having already seen over a dozen little girls who inexplicably resembled Mo-jeong in some way. How is it that this little girl's eyes and mouth resembled Mo-jeong so much? Even though she was chubby and had a bobbed cut, if only her lower face wasn't a bit longer, and if she didn't have that scar on her forehead looking like she had fallen somewhere, they would have been incredibly alike. She smiled bitterly at the thought. Just as someone took my Mo-jeong, couldn't I just steal a little girl like that and raise her? She revisited this terrifying thought she occasionally had these days. Pouring out all her affection and charm, Jong-suk bent down and stroked the bobbed hair with her hand. "Hey, little one, how old are you?" Perhaps afraid of a stranger's hand, the little girl just stared up with wide eyes and gave no answer. But as the hand reached out again, "Oh my, our baby is so pretty. What's your name?" and stroked her head again. This time she awkwardly staggered to her feet, acting as if she had been insulted, and ran straight away. Disheartened, Jong-suk sighed to herself, thinking there were plenty of cold children to well. Ooh! As her gaze followed behind the girl, she thought something was strange. Though she couldn't see clearly because of the distance, a man who looked like an invalid, wearing a white durumagi and a fedora pulled down low, stood coughing painfully, glaring alternately at the little girl approaching him and this side. At a glance, his tall, slender height and stooped shoulders made Jong-suk think, as human affairs go, that perhaps. But then she insisted to herself that it was absolutely impossible, yet unconsciously took a few steps forward, gradually closing the distance, even looking hard at him from just 5 steps away. Although his face was sunken from illness and his body withered to half its size, he was undoubtedly the husband she had struggled so hard to get rid of in the past. "Ah, you." Jong-suk opened her mouth, not knowing what she was trying to say, but the next words didn't come out. Even the man she shuddered at like an enemy felt surprisingly deeply welcome upon encountering him unexpectedly after such a long time. After staring blankly for a while, unable to bear it any longer, she barely managed to speak. "Have you been in Seoul all this time?" The man turned his head away and, keeping his face averted, answered coldly, "I wandered here and there." And there was no sign of gladness or surprise, no expression to be found on his face. More than anything else, Jong-suk was desperately curious whether the bobbed-haired girl securely embraced in front of him was Mo-jeong or not. Hesitantly, she raised her hand to point at the girl and asked, "Is she our Mo-jeong?" But he stayed silent as if he hadn't heard, and instead of answering, covered his mouth with his fist and coughed. But Jong-suk thought to herself, "That must be Mo-jeong. Looking at her mouth and eyes, it's definitely Mo-jeong." She never dreamed she could become so unrecognizable, making her realize once again what a truly long time 2 years was. But even more surprising was that, although she thought he was a wreck who wouldn't recognize his own child, thinking of him secretly stealing his own child and taking her around like this, his true intentions were something only heaven and earth could know. Not only that, he didn't say a word when they separated. So she also couldn't understand his intentions in stealthily taking her a year later. Does he really find her precious? "She's Mo-jeong, isn't she?" Jong-suk asked again, though it was a question she didn't need to ask. The man still pretended not to hear and stood silently, seeming to not have abandoned his stubborn, blunt habits. However, seeing that although he himself was shabbily dressed, he had dressed the little girl cleanly, and seeing those chubby cheeks that had grown plumper than when she suffered with her mother, Jong-suk felt that, in any case, the father taking her was rather a blessing from heaven for the child's sake than staying with her mother. Knowing that no matter how much she asked the man, she wouldn't get a single word in reply, Jong-suk this time turned to the little girl and called, "Hey, Mo-jeong!" The little girl, buried in the adult's durumagi, suddenly lifted her head. Thinking to herself how she could so completely fail to recognize the mother who had raised her, even if 2 years was a long time, tears immediately poured from her eyes. She desperately wanted to hug her tight, but fearing she might make the shy child cry, she awkwardly just reached out her hand, stroked her head, and said, "Hey Mo-jeong, how old are you this year?" Or, "Hey Mo-jeong, don't you recognize me?" while she was asking these unanswered questions from behind her back over there. "Jung-suk, aren't you going?" Gyeongja seemed to be rushing over. "Then where are you staying these days?" Jung-suk hastily, yet in a tearful voice, practically begged, and unexpectedly the man obediently replied with a street number in Changgyeongwon. Only then, feeling relieved, she stroked the girl once more, saying, "Take care, Mo-jong." And before Gyeongja could come closer, she hurriedly retreated toward her. Gyeongja strutted over, swinging her arms, and in an overly excited tone said, "I flattened those brats. Ah, saying my butt is gonna wear out, damn punks. I was gonna chew them out some more." "You're too much. They're just immature kids. They can't even say that? You gathered a whole crowd and made such a fuss over that." The more Young-ae thought about the embarrassing humiliation she suffered because of Gyeongja, the more extremely angry she felt. Still, Gyeongja acted high and mighty, saying in a sarcastic tone, "I'm sure you would. Why, are you someone who lives off saving face?" Provoking her again, she then turned towards Jung-suk and asked, "Jung-suk, who was that guy earlier?" "Oh, that man, the landlord of the house I used to rent." Jung-suk answered nonchalantly and brought the handkerchief to her face again. If the child is so precious, wouldn't the wife who bore her be a little precious too? Looking back for clues in their past, she wanted to firmly believe that even if he didn't say it, he must have loved his wife inside. Seeing how he somehow ended up like that, even falling ill, he must have suffered greatly all this time. If so, grabbing the collar of a man who stumbled in late at night and badgering him was wrong on her part. Throwing the bean sprout porridge he was just about to eat onto the ground, telling him to skip breakfast since he drank, was also wrong. She was just filled with regrets about everything. Since she had treated her father so poorly, she thought it was perhaps natural that even the little girl wouldn't look upon her mother fondly, which made an even greater sorrow well up inside her. But she felt a little reassured, thinking that if she went to see him early tomorrow morning, sincerely apologized that everything in the past was her fault, and promised that she would not utter a single peep of complaint in the future, even if she starved, then perhaps, since human affairs are unpredictable, he might live with her again. Just then, Young-ae shook her arm. "Unni, you enjoyed the flower viewing today, right?" "I really did. You know flowers are best viewed from afar. If you get too close, the scent just gives you a headache. But still, the flower viewing today was really nice." Furious at being pecked at endlessly by Gyeongja and even being humiliated, Young-ae tried her best to get back at her. Gyeongja snorted through her nose, thinking, "What do you guys know about flower viewing? To tell the truth, I'm the only one who did it right. Flower viewing is when you know how to smell the flowers. What's the point of just looking?" Bluffing like this, she turned toward Jung-suk and saw her handkerchief going up to her face even more frequently than before. Feeling very sorry for her, Gyeongja sidled right up to her and kindly consoled her, saying, "Why are you acting like this over just losing one daughter? Without her, doesn't your body feel lighter and more comfortable?" Just then, a chilly spring breeze blew against the napes of their necks, fluttering snow-like petals. From the direction of the gate, a bell began to ring with a clang, clang, signaling everyone to leave. The exit bell ringing through Changgyeongwon, along with the fluttering, snow-like cherry blossom petals, brings the story to a close, leaving behind Jung-suk's sorrowful resolution and a lingering emotional resonance. As Young-ae remarks, flowers are best viewed from afar, suggesting that the seemingly beautiful lives of others often reveal their own hidden pains and realities when observed closely. Highlighted by Kim You-jeong's signature sharp yet compassionate gaze, Night Cherry Blossoms leaves us pondering the bitter cross-sections of life that exist just beneath the radiance of a festive spring day.